course, in the 19th century, it was known. You'll see it in the medical textbooks at the time. But you have to remember, that was a predominantly an agrarian culture. Most people were employed in working on the land, in sowing, in harvesting, and all that kind of thing. That's prior to the Industrial Revolution, when things start to change. If you look at the period of time before that, 1800 to approximately 1850, most people were living and working on the land, and not much access to electric light. They have oil lights at home, of course, but their working practices and their hours correspond to the daylight hours because that's the only light they have access to. So most people are working from dawn to dusk throughout the year. And you look for the records of skin cancer. It hardly ever happens at all. Even although they're exposed to huge amounts of ultraviolet, far more than we are. We spend our lives indoors. We use sunscreen. We wear hats because we've been taught by the government just how dangerous the sunlight is. We've become a nation of vampires. And even with all of those precautions, we still get skin cancer at unsettlingly high rates because external protection is not really very effective. Our ancestors were internally protected. They ate a variety of foods which contain compounds, many of them phytoalexins or plant tertiary compounds, which once you eat them, they're absorbed, they get into the blood, and they settle just in the superficial and medium layers of the skin. And they are extremely protective. They absorb ultraviolet. It's like an internal sunscreen. They're anti-inflammatory. They prevent the progression from exposure to radiation and cancer. They interrupt that sequence in many other ways as well. We were protected in the way that a hermit crab is when it wanders along the beach and finds the shell discarded by another animal and puts it on. We were using the ultraviolet protection that the plants produce for their own purposes, and we were using it for our own purposes. Except those compounds have largely gone from our diet as well. As a result, we attempt to replace that with external protective factors, like sunscreen, and that doesn't really do a very effective job. We've moved a long way away from our nutritional origins, and we're paying a high price for that. It has left us vulnerable in many, many ways. It's not only damaging our hearts, brains, livers, kidneys, and every other organ you can think of, it's also damaging our immune system, this intoxication or poisoning that I kept on referring to. And there's quite a lot of evidence for this now. In many parts of the world, we're seeing increases in various types of infections, such as pertussis, which is caused by bacterium, Bordetella pertussis. We're seeing increases in the number of viral infections and at least one fungal infection. Now, you might say that this is all due to climate change, possibly. That may be playing a role in some cases. Vaccination rates, that would be true, for example, for pertussis, since the public health disaster of the mandated COVID shots, which were a public health malpractice, to put it mildly. People have become more reluctant, understandably, to subject their children to vaccination. I'm not pro-vax or anti-vax. I think that's a ridiculous dichotomy. One has to look at these vaccinations, I think, on a case-by-case basis. Some clearly have a good therapeutic index, some clearly don't. But I understand why there has been a catastrophic loss of faith in the medical profession, in the regulatory agencies, and particularly in vaccination programs. I do understand that, I sympathize with it. And it's probably playing a role as well.
Probably.
Who said probably?
Biden.
Put your hand up so I can see it. Okay, you think it's playing a role?
Absolutely, of course.
Yes, I think it is. I mean, more and more people talk in terms of vaccine hesitancy. And of course, there are enormous PR programs that are put out by the pharmaceutical industry to try and persuade you otherwise, which I also understand. The pharmaceutical industry is making a huge percentage of its funds overall by selling vaccines now. It's easier for them to bring a vaccine to market than it is to bring a new chemical to the market. And certainly in North America and in many other parts of the world, they've succeeded in gaining complete immunity. So they can rush the production of the schedule of these products, bring them to the market, and if anything does go wrong, there is no comeback. And this is not right. It fosters irresponsibility on their part. I think there is some evidence that our immune systems are being degraded by the current diet and lifestyle. And one piece of evidence is derived from the incidence of hospital-acquired infections. That is fairly consistently showing an increase. And if you look at sepsis deaths, the data is actually rather massive. It's not